Hello, everyone. My name is Patricia Rodriguez. I am the events manager here at Flatiron School. I'm very happy to have you all join us for this one-on-one workshops, which are the perfect opportunity to get a taste of the type of skills you can learn here at Flatiron School. This evening, we have one of our instructors, Enoch Griffin, who will be leading our Coding for Beginners workshop. Today's activity specifically is building a calculator, and I hope you guys are as excited as I am. Before I pass it along, a quick reminder that the chat feature is available as well as the Q&A. While there will be some time at the end dedicated to answer questions, if you have anything that you resonate with, that's been shared, you want to show encouragement to the instructor or to any of the participants, or you have any questions, don't be shy and drop them there. If you are going to utilize the chat feature, just make sure that you are sending the message to everyone instead of the default, which is the option of host to host and panelists. With that being said, this event will be recorded and it will be shared with attendees via emails in the upcoming days. You can always also check out our YouTube channel where most of our public events are shared if you do not receive this email. So without further ado, I'll let you take it away. And again, welcome to Coding for Beginners.
All right, welcome everybody. So my name is Enoch. I have been an instructor with Flatiron School for close to 8 years now. So a while. But it's nice to meet everybody. Cool. So can I see in chat, like, has anyone had previous experience, no experience? Just put in chat if you've had experience. All right, seeing no experience, some experience. All right, all right. Cool. So totally okay if you haven't had any experience. Coding, there's a lot of myths in coding, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But one of the myths in coding is that you have to have like a computer science degree to really understand how code works, or you have to have like be a wizard at math, which is a couple of myths in coding. So if you don't have any experience with like computer science or anything like that, that is totally fine. Totally fine. Cool. So I have some slides. Now I'm not going to, the slides isn't very long. Like, I like to be really hands-on with our sessions. So kind of showing you a little bit of like the process of coding and what coding is, what it means to be a software engineer. Uh, we're going to go through some of the slides. If you have already downloaded Visual Studio Code, then you feel free to follow along. And yeah, let's get started. So, all right, can everybody see this?
Yes.
Cool. So there's going to be a little bit of back and forth between slides and me coding and showing you some of the information that I'm going to be sharing. So welcome to Coding for Beginners. The agenda topics today is what is software engineering and what requirements do you need to engineer software. We're going to discuss the terminal, IDE, and coding environments. We're going to learn a little bit about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and apply what we learned in order to code a calculator. So what is software engineering? Software engineering is the process of designing, developing, testing, and maintaining software applications. So what do I need to be a software engineer? A coding editor, such as Visual Studio Code. There's the Sublime editor, there's Visual Studios. There's a lot of different editors out there. Just kind of pick one that works for you. We love, at Flatiron School, we love Visual Studio Code. It's one of the most robust coding editors there is. Also, knowledge of coding languages such as HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and There's a ton of other languages out there. To learn it, you don't have to know these, but in order to do the job, you have to know these at least some language to be able to uh, apply to your day-to-day. And also knowledge of how to use a terminal or command prompt. So let's talk about the coding environment. So your coding environment consists of an IDE, which is an integrated development environment, which includes a coding editor, usually a compiler, and a debugging tool. Many of these editors also include an integrated terminal inside of the editor. Also, any languages that you develop will need to be installed onto your machine to properly use it. So a combination of these things will allow you to efficiently design software. So let's talk a little bit about the coding languages. So some of the beginning coding languages that you would use would be HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Those are usually a very good start to coding. So coding languages are languages that a computer understands. A computer language gives instructions on how to operate a program. For this demonstration, we'll be looking at HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Once we understand what each of these are used for, then we will apply it and build a calculator with it at the very end. So let's talk about HTML. So HTML is Hypertext Markup Language, and it's used for creating web documents. It lays the structure of the document. It consists of HTML elements, also called tags. Some examples of HTML include headers, anchor links, paragraphs, and images. HTML files have a .html extension. Cool. Nakuya, did you have a question? All right. So let's close this out real quick and let's actually take a look at what HTML looks like. So this right here is our, okay, let me see here. Oh, okay, no problem, no problem. Okay, so this is Visual Studio Code right here, this program, and you can see that we have this integrated terminal right here. So this terminal is used to, we can run servers on it. We can do certain commands, like I can create a folder. So let's just do that real quick. So I created a folder. We can remove the folder. So you can give what we call bash commands to our terminal. On command prompt, it's a little different. Now, we don't teach command prompt. Usually with a Windows environment, we have you install a Linux environment, so WSL, which is Windows subsystem for Linux. But a terminal kind of gives, you can give it commands to do certain things. So instead of like double clicking a folder, we can actually go into that folder in the terminal and actually see its contents. Now this used in conjunction with this can run servers, and it can install languages. So we can use this to install our language that we're working with. So that's the necessity of the terminal. Now, on the left-hand side here, I already have this folder opened. So we're inside of a folder called Build a Calculator. And we have a CSS file, an index.html file, a JavaScript file, and a README. We're going to open up the index.html, and we're going to kind of see what elements look like. So to structure our HTML file. Now, if you're following along, there's a lot of shortcuts you can take in Visual Studio Code. So if I was to do like HTML :5 and hit tab, for example, you can see that it's going to create the structure of our HTML file. There's a lot of nice shortcuts. If you're learning how to code, learn these shortcuts. They are a lifesaver. Cool. So what we can see here is we have doc type HTML. So declaring it as an HTML document. And then you might notice that we have a less than symbol and a greater than symbol that kind of wraps our structure here. And these are what we call either HTML elements or HTML tags. Either way works fine. They're both the same thing. So a tag, this kind of describes what the tag is, and this is a property or an attribute of the tag. So for example, this HTML tag has a attribute called lang, and it's set to English. And that'll kind of tell our browser what language that our HTML website is supporting. The title here is our tab. So let's go ahead and open this up. So I'm going to type in open index.html, and that's just going to open it here. If you're on Windows, you can do explorer.exe index.html. I'm on Mac, so I'm going to use open. And we can see document right here. If I was to change this to build a calculator and save it and refresh the page, you can see that it changed. So that is the title attribute in our head tag. So we're just kind of laying out the structure of our web document in the browser. So there are a couple of things. So the head right here is kind of our metadata. It's data that we're not necessarily going to be seeing or the user wouldn't really interact with. The body tag here is the body of the document. So this is what the users would see. So let's take a look at a couple of tags here just for a demonstration. We have headers. How do we get that file in order to open in Visual Studio Code? So how do you create the file? If you have a, let's see, if you're doing this manually, you could go to File, and then I believe what you can do is maybe go to Open, and then you can you should be able to create a folder. Let me see here. Yeah, so you should be able to create a folder somewhere, like a new folder. And then, so you can create it like a new folder here and then just open that. And then once that folder is open with Visual Studio Code, then what you can do is on the left-hand side, you can right-click and create new file and type in index.html. And that's how you can create a new file in the editor. And then once it's done, to get caught up to where I am, you can type in, and I'll type this into chat so that you have it, but HTML:5, and then hit tab, and then that'll fill it out. So we're going to create a an H1. So this is a header1 tag. We're going to type in hello world. And this header tag right here is the biggest header that you can have. There's 6 different headers. H1s are the biggest. Cool. So if I refresh this, we can see hello world. And then we can also create, let's go ahead and create the rest of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an H2. We'll say hello world again. So what we can see here is we have an opening tag. So the opening tag has the less than and greater than symbol that wraps the tag name. The closing tag right here, you might notice it has a slash in front of it. So that's how you can identify that this closes. And we know everything in between it is going to be the text or the content of that tag. Cool. So let's take a look at H2. So we might notice that H2 is smaller. So H1 is the biggest, H2 gets smaller, and H3 gets smaller than that. So H3, hello world. H4, and you might notice these things drop down. If they drop down, these help you auto-complete your tags. So if you hit tab, or if you click it, well, it didn't work when I clicked it, but if you hit tab, okay. So if you type in H4 and hit tab, that will auto-complete it. And then you can type in hello world. And you can see that they're getting smaller and smaller and smaller. We'll go ahead and do the H5, hello world, and then one more for H6. And this is the smallest header. It's really tiny. So those are the different headers that you can have. You can have dividers. So dividers are div tags. And this kind of helps you section out your HTML files. Kamathi, why do they get smaller? Is that your question? It's just the way that they're designed. There's 6 different versions of a header. The H1 being the biggest, and it just scales down to H6. Yep. All right. And then the dividers is kind of how we can divide up our application. So if we're structuring it, we can kind of structure it where like this div is going to contain like this content. So we could add like this so a P tag is a paragraph. So we could put a paragraph inside this divider, for example, and we could say this is a paragraph inside a divider. And then we could, so you could add like contents to this divider. You can have different dividers kind of separating your HTML a little bit if you want to. Let's see here. Let's add an image. We'll just go find an image in the browser. And we'll add an image of like a puppy. I think that would be okay. So let's do an image tag. So image tag is img. And for this one, it takes in a source, which the source is an attribute of the image tag. This right here is going to point to a URL of an image. So we're going to grab that here in a second. But the alt tag here is a alternative text. So this helps like screen readers be able to identify what you might be hovered over. So this is for anyone that needs the screen reader. So it's for accessibility needs. And we could say this is an image of a puppy. And let's go grab a puppy image. So we're going to say puppy image. We'll just go borrow one. Oh, that one's cute. Okay, copy image address. So you can right click these, copy image address is what we'd want. Sometimes these are really big, kind of like that. That's huge. So we're probably going to delete it, but just for demonstration, these image addresses get super, super big. But we can see that the image is now on our page. So as this is adding structure, you might notice it's not there's no design to it, right? So HTML is not the design of websites, but it does add structure to the website. So let's go back and talk about our how do we add design to a website? So we got the structure, we have all the contents of it, but it doesn't look good. So how do we do that? So does anybody know? Like, put in chat if you have an idea or if you know what we use to design websites. Anybody know? You got it, CSS. So we have CSS to help us style our websites. So let's take a look at that. So what is CSS? So CSS is Cascade Style Sheets. It's a styling language that we use to style HTML documents. CSS includes adding colors, creating a layout, adding borders. We use CSS selectors in order to target the HTML that we want to style. And then we can use, so in order to connect our CSS file to our HTML, we're going to use a link element. And that will load in our CSS. So let's take a look at what that's going to look like. And also, I'm going to undo our image here. It was a cute puppy, but it's taken up way too much of our screen there. Okay, so I know. It's a cute puppy though. Okay, so let's design this just a little bit. We're not gonna go crazy with the design, but just to kind of see enough for to know what CSS is. So what we're gonna do is we're going to link in our CSS with a link element. So we're gonna say link CSS. And so link colon CSS right here for anyone that wants to use the shortcut. And we'll talk about it after it generates. But link.css. So we have our relationship. So it's going to be a style sheet. And then we're going to have our href right here, which is referencing a file. Now, if we look at our files here, I have one called index.css. So we actually want to change this to point to our file here. So we're going to say index.css. And that will link in our style sheet. Cool. We'll go refresh the page. Perfect. Okay. So let's do this. Let's add a little bit of styling. So for CSS selectors, we have to target HTML in order to style that HTML. So in this case, what we're going to do is let's target this H1. We're going to start off with that, and then we're going to go into IDs and classes. So in the CSS file, we can now say H1. So we only have one H1. This would style every H1 on the page. And then we could say, okay, we want to style. We want the color. Let's make the color green. We'll make the color green, but a semicolon at the end. The semicolon right here will tell it that this is the end of that statement. So colon, and then double quotes, green. So if I refresh the page, oh, it's not coming up. Color green, index as CSS. Give me just a second here. Why is that not working? Oh, I know why. You don't use double quotes in CSS. Okay, there we go. Yeah, don't use double quotes. That's going to be a JavaScript thing here in a minute. But if we refresh, we can see that it's now green. All right, perfect. So now if we made another H1, it would automatically be green. It's going to target every H1. So if we do like H2 and make the color blue, for example, now we have a blue H2. Some other things that we could do is we could change the font size. So maybe we want every H2 to be bigger than our H1. We can do that. We can modify it however we want to. So we could say font size. Let's make the font size 36 pixels. It's probably going to be really big. Nope, it's not too bad. But now our H2s are all bigger than our H1. So we can modify it and style it any which way we want to. We can also grab our body tag here. And let's say that we want our background to be a different color. Maybe we want it to be, let's see. We can make it like a gray color. That might be a little hard to see. We'll see. That's not too bad. So there we go. So we can style the background color. We can align text if we want to. So let's go to our HTML, and for the H3 and the H4, we're going to center these. So we're going to kind of reposition them on the page a little bit. But in order to do that, I'm going to say we're going to give both of these a class. Now, classes are attributes that can be shared as kind of like identifier attributes, but they can be shared between multiple elements or multiple tags. So if I want to identify this H3 and the H4 and be able to style them the same, then I can give both of them the same class. So we could say class equals, and let's say center text. We'll say center text. Cool. And now to be able to target all the HTML that has the same class, we can go here and say center, I already forgot what it's called, text. And I'm using a dot in front of it. This dot is helping us identify it as a class. So anything that starts with a dot will be a class. Anything that starts with nothing is a tag. And then here we can do text align center. And now those two are centered in the page. Cool. All right, so that's a little bit about CSS. Now, is this the most beautiful website in the world? I mean, like, not really. Like, but there's a lot that you can do with CSS. We're not gonna go into like huge detail about it, but so what we know is HTML is the structure of the document, and CSS is how we can add color, how we can make our websites look a lot better. All right, so let's continue. Okay, so let's talk about JavaScript. So JavaScript is how we add interactivity to a website. So before JavaScript, most websites were just static. They were just documents. You couldn't really like make them do anything except be descriptive. And then JavaScript came along and it allowed us to start having like pop-ups. We could have drop-down menus, and we was able to do a lot more. Oh, yes. Okay. Do you need to see the HTML again? Is everybody? Yeah, so, okay, here we go. Yeah, just let me know. Put pluses in chat when you're ready, or minuses in chat if you need a little bit more time to catch up in HTML or CSS. And if anyone needs to see the CSS file, please reach out also in chat. Now, do take note, we're going to be removing this when we start building the calculator. This is just like examples. The calculator is definitely coming up at the end of this. But if you kind of want to play around with it, that's totally fine. We're still doing good on time, so. All right. Okay. Cool. Just let me know once you're caught up. And let me know also if you need to see a CSS file. Okay, perfect. All right, let's go ahead and continue. Okay, so some examples of what JavaScript can do: clicking a button to make an image appear. So adding animations and making a drop down appear. JavaScript is added to a HTML document by using a script element to source the JavaScript to the HTML document. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So here's our index.js file. And inside of the index.html here, at the very bottom, right before the closing body tag, right here, we can type in script source equals, so src, index.js, and then we can close it. All right. So this right here will bring in our JavaScript. So we had the styling, we have the structure. Now we're going to add the interactivity to our website. So the first thing that you always really want to do is to test to make sure things are linked up correctly. So inside of our JavaScript, this is where we're going to be adding our code. And if we take a look at our browser here, there is a way to right click and inspect. And what that'll do is that'll bring up our developer tools, okay? So this right here should have one. And if you're in Google Chrome, it'll be a little bit easier. It might look a little different and maybe like Firefox or one of the other editors. But if you're on Google Chrome, what you want to look for is console. So console here allows us to display information from our JavaScript file if we were to do like a console.log, which we're going to do here in a minute. But we are going to print to our console here from our JavaScript file. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, console, talking about our console here. We want to log to it. So we're going to say dot log. We're going to add parentheses to run it. So again, coding languages is our way of giving instruction to a computer to run on how to run a program, right? So we're given instructions here to log to our console. And we want to tell it what to say here. Now, double quotes is what we call a string in JavaScript. And anything that we put in here can be whatever we want. So we could say like hello world. The computer won't really understand the language of it, but it will mean everything to us as either a user or a developer. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to type in hi. And what we're going to do here is we're going to see if this logs to our console. So I saved the file. Now, if you want a shortcut for saving to the file, you can either, if you're on Windows, Control S. If you're on Mac, you can Command S, and that'll automatically save it. You'll see a circle there if it's unsaved right here in the tab, or if it is saved, the circle will go away. So if we refresh the page, we get our console.log here. So what can we do in JavaScript? So we know that it's linked in. So what can we do with it? So to understand JavaScript is to understand what kind of tools you have available to you. So we have strings, as we saw here. We also have integers or numbers. We have floats or numbers with decimals. We have booleans. Now does anyone know what a boolean is? You got it. So it's yes or no, or represents true or false. Absolutely. Great job. And we also have many others. We're not going to go into a whole lot of them today, but just to keep a good time here. But we have strings, integers, floats, and booleans. So in this case, we can do math. So let's console.log like what 1 plus 1 is. So we can do math. So we get hi and 2. Yep, strings are words. And then we also have floats and booleans. Cool. So let's we also have functions. So functions are so as we have tools like data types, which are kind of like our nouns, right? So maybe we can say, well, this is Bob. 23, 23.3. Functions are verbs. They're what we're going to tell the computer to do. It's a little chunk of code of logic, or it's a little chunk of code that we're going to say, hey, computer, whenever you run this, run all this code within this. Yeah, it's our actions, exactly. So so here we could say say hi. So the structure for this is we give it a name. So we start off with a function keyword. We give it a name. So this is the name of our function. The parentheses, we're going to talk a little bit more about that here in a second, but the parentheses here is arguments. So we can pass in like different things to our function if we wanted to. And this right here is our curly bracket. So this is called a code block. And in between both of these is where all of our code is going to live that belongs to say hi. So I could do I could do console.log hi programmer here. And I'm gonna comment these out. So comments means that the computer it'll keep it in the editor, but the computer won't run it. So it can be used to like reference or explain things or just something that you can have as like a reminder. But yeah, it's really nice to have. So our function here, so this is called a function definition. So this is us defining what this function should do. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean we're doing it at the moment. We're just giving ourselves the ability to do this. If we want to use this function, we can reference the function and then call it. So this right here is a reference. This won't run our code. It won't run our code until we add our parentheses here. So if I refresh this, do you have to use one quotation mark for the function method? So right here, you can use either single or double. That is totally fine. Either one will work. They're both strings. Yeah, cool. All right, so I refresh the page. We get hi programmer. Now, sometimes we might want to have like a name pop up here. And we can do that with arguments. So let's do this real quick. We're just going to run our function 3 times. So if I save it and refresh, we get hi programmer, hi programmer, hi programmer. So it's just every time we call the function or run it, it's just running that code over and over and over again. So let's make it to where this can change. Like maybe we want to say hi to somebody, right? And we can do that. So to do that, we can say, so going back to our argument, we can say, okay, I don't know what name I'm going to be typing here, but we're going to reference it to name. So an argument, when we're defining it here, this is a reference. You can name this anything that you want to. And what I'm going to do is instead of having programmer here, I'm going to delete it. And then I'm going to take this name and I'm going to type it in here. Okay. Now, in order to use the value of this, we have to inject the value into it. So that means I need JavaScript to say what name is and put that there. Okay. So that means I'm going to add a $sign, a curly bracket, and a curly bracket. So this is called string interpolation. Now, there is a specific kind of string that allows for this. So originally I said 1 quote and 2 quotes, it doesn't matter. When we're injecting or interpolating or adding the value of name into this, we need to actually use a special type of string. And this is with backticks. And for many of you that might not know which key the backtick key is, to the left of the 1 key, you should see the backtick key. If you hold shift and press that key, it gives you the tilde or the curly line. The backtick is without the shift button. So that'll give you the backticks. And then instead of using the single quote or the double quote, you use backticks. And what you should see is that this changes color, which is a sign that you're doing it correctly. Cool. So right now we have a reference to a name. Now, this does not get a name until we call it. So right here, I could say it's the key to the left of the 1 key. So at the top of your keyboard where 1 is, go to the left of that, and you should see the backtick key. So we can pass Bob here. Any other keys with it, as it doesn't seem to be working? It just has to surround it, kind of like this. Let me see if I can copy and paste it, and maybe you can copy and paste it from chat. So try copying and pasting that in, and maybe you can use it from chat in there. Sometimes it doesn't work though, because the characters that's used in Zoom sometimes differs from Visual Studio Code, and it'll confuse it. But just in the chance that it might help. So interesting though. Yeah, yeah, no problem, no problem. But yeah, that's the backtick key. It should be the same key as the tilde key. So to break this down, what we're doing is we're saying name. Think of name kind of like storage. So name is going to store whatever we send to it. So in this case, when we call it this time, name is going to store Bob. And when we console.log this, it's going to say hi. And then the computer is going to see this. And it's like, okay, well, we're injecting something from the storage. What's inside of its storage? And inside of this reference of name, we have Bob. So it's like, okay, well, we're going to put Bob there in that string, and we're going to say console.log hi Bob. So that's going to be for this one. We're going to go ahead and add two more names. So we're going to say Sarah. And then we're going to say Leah. And if we save this and refresh it, we now have a function that, depending on how we call it, can change. So we have hi Bob, hi Sarah, and hi Leah. Cool. Other things in JavaScript is variables. So we could say, I'm going to comment this out. We're going to say let, which is a declarative, a declaration. And we'll talk about that here in a second, but it's a declaration of a variable. We'll have a variable name, so we could say name equals, and then we'll say Bob. So like our argument here that acts as storage, variables are also storage. And we can store any kind of piece of data type. So these data types up here inside of a reference keyword. So anytime I say name now, name is going to refer to Bob. And then I can refer to it like on the next line if we wanted to in console.log name. I am not able to see nothing printing in my console.log. Am I missing something? With the function, okay, so do you have the inside the HTML file, do you have the script here? So it should be right above the closing of the body tag. So the first thing you want to check is just to make sure that the script tag is set up properly. That could be like one issue that it could be. So just make sure it looks exactly like this. Perfect. Just let me know when you're done and we'll continue. All right, is it working? All right. Cool. I'll go ahead and comment this out and then bring this back. So we can console.log name here, and it would give us Bob. Now we can also do conditionals. So think of a conditional kind of like a fork in the road. So if we had, let's say we were going here, and we had a street that we needed to go to, right? So we have this fork in the road, and either we can go left or right. Based on the street name, if the street name matches the street that we need to go on, maybe it's like the left street. If that's it, then we're going to go left and we're not going to go right. That is the same philosophy of a conditional statement. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So with this is called an if statement. So if we do if, we do some sort of condition, we surround the condition with parentheses, and then we add our code block. So remember, code blocks are a block of code that belongs to something. Like this one belonged to this function. This one is going to belong to this if statement. So in this case, we're going to say if name, and we're going to say equals Bob. Now, 2 equal signs is different than 1 equal sign. 1 equal signs means we're going to be setting something or storing something to a variable. 2 equal signs means we're going to make sure that it matches. So does name match Bob? And in this case, it does. So let's console.log. The name is Bob. And let's just run that and see what happens. So if we refresh the page, the name is Bob. Let's change this to Sarah. So are we going to get a console.log or no? I see a no, and I agree. We are not going to get a console.log because this is not true. And because it's not true, we're not going to run the logic, right? That means this logic right here, we're going to skip over. So if I refresh, we don't have any console.logs. Let's do an else if. So we can continue our ifs, but we're going to say else if to kind of attach these together. So this is kind of like where our fork is coming in, where we're saying, okay, we're going to go left if the name is Sarah, but maybe we're going to go on this other road. Maybe we have like multiple roads we could go on, and this would be one of the multiple roads. So if the name is Bob, console.log, the name is Bob. So in this case, we have this other road that we could go on, and only if the name is Bob. And if it does, let's go on the road and run the logic. So we're going to console.log the name is Bob. And if we refresh the page, we can see that it skipped over the name is Sarah because that was not true. And it switched to the next road that it could have been, right? And we said that the name is Bob, so we're going to console.log it. But let's change this to Leah. So now it's going to skip over this one, and it's also going to skip over this one. And let's say, you know what, for any other name, for any name at all, we're going to say the name is in fact a name. And this means that it doesn't matter what we call it. As long as it's not Sarah and Leah, then this is going to console.log. So if it's Bob and I refresh, the name is in fact a name. If we change this to Mark, the name is in fact a name. Because it's not Leah, it's not Sarah, it's going to default to this one. It's always going to go there if these two are not true. And then if we switch this to Leah, And also let's switch this to Leah and this to Sarah. That probably makes sense. So just changing the names to match what the names could be here. And if we refresh, the name is Leah because we switched it right here. Cool. And that's if else statements. There's one more thing that we're going to cover before we go into our final bit, which is creating the calculator. And that is event listeners. So we talked about websites being interactive, but we haven't actually interacted with the website yet. So in order to interact with our website here, we are going to be using CSS selectors to grab HTML. And we're going to say, okay, if we interact with this HTML in a certain way, then it's going to do this. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to add a event to this H1 here. So if we click this H1, it's going to alert to us, hello world. Okay. So there's a couple of steps that we're going to do. So step one, get the HTML element that we need to attach the event to. Step two, attach the event. Step three, define the code that runs when the event is triggered. So these are our 3 steps that you can use in order to know how to do this just about every single time. So in order to interact with our HTML, we can access our HTML in JavaScript. So for us to get the H1 here, we're going to say, we're going to set a variable. So remember, variables are for storing things. So we're going to say, let H1 equals, and then out of our HTML document, so this entire thing is a document, we're going to say document. Let's query selector. So we're getting a HTML element. So we're querying it. So we're trying to find it. And we're going to be using a CSS selector. So query selector. Now, double quotes or single quotes works. Don't use backticks for this. And for the query selector, we're going to say we want the H1. So it's the same way that we use the query selector here, that we just said H1, and that was enough to to select it. Cool. So once we grab our H1 here, we're going to add an event listener. Our event listener here takes in the type of event. So I mentioned that I wanted to click it. So our type is going to be click. And then we pass it one more argument. So this is a function that we can call on HTML elements. So we're calling it with parentheses. We're passing in arguments. You can have multiple arguments, but every argument needs to be separated by a comma. So we're going to add click, comma, and then this has to be some sort of function that we're going to be passing in there. So a function that we defined that we can pass in here. So in this case, we're going to create a function called alert hello world. So in this case, we're going to say alert hello world, and we're just going to pass in the entire function there. So we're not going to call it with parentheses here. We don't want to run it. We just want to pass it in. And now we can take our H1. So we're going to take our H1 here. Or sorry, no, we're not going to do that. We just want to alert. So we're going to say alert, parentheses. And what alert does is it's going to make a box appear on the page. And we're going to say, let's say that you clicked the H1. Okay, so going back to the steps, get the HTML element. We did that here. We attached the event. So we did that. We attached the event, the click. We attached it to the H1. And what we want to do is alert hello world. So we want to do something. And when we think we want to do something, we're going to be using a function. So we're just going to alert you clicked the H1. I'm going to refresh this. And now what's going on is that H1 is listening for a click to happen. So, and if I click it, we get you click the H1 right there. And H1s, if you look at it, span the entire page. So if I click over here, for example, it will still, like if I click all the way over here, it still does it because H1 spans the entire page. Even though like the text is right here, the H1 spans the entire thing. So you can click anywhere in that area. All right, any questions about that? So that's how, and that's basically what JavaScript is used for, is this right here. It's adding interactivity to our website. So I was able to click on the website and I interacted with it. It did something because I interacted with it. And that's the main purpose of JavaScript. So a combination of HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, and you can have a pretty nice website. Other things to take note of, and we're not going to cover this here, but there is like databases, there's also backend. So everything that we did right here is front end. It's everything from a user's perspective. We do have backend as well, where we're interacting with the database, we're storing information. And of course, we would have to have like an entire like few lectures to go into that kind of thing. Which we don't have time, unfortunately, now. But there's a whole world of coding out there, not just what we see here. This is the basics, but you can definitely expand on it, and it's an amazing field to be in. Cool. Okay, so we are now to the point where we're going to build a calculator. So what we're not going to do at this point, we're not going to style it. We're going to keep it pretty simple. We might, if there's time at the end, maybe we'll style something just to make it kind of not look terrible. But we're just going to focus on the interactivity. We want to make it a calculator, and then at the end, if we have time, we might make it look better. So that means that I'm going to comment all this out. Our HTML here, I'm going to go ahead and delete all this. It's not code that we want for the calculator. We just kind of want a calculator. So, or you know what, I'll just comment it out. So if you, a little tip here, if you highlight, you hold down Command and do /, you can mass comment out. If you're not on Mac, you can use Control and / to mass comment out, and then the computer won't read it, and it'll still be there in case you want to play around with it later. You can absolutely do that. Yeah, there's a lot of really neat tricks. Like once you learn how to use the tricks, you can do things like move around this. There's a lot of them. You can tab it over, tab it to the left. Yeah, there's a lot of really neat tricks. Like if I wanted to grab all the hello worlds, we can do that and have multiple things. So yeah, there's a whole world of shortcuts out there. So once you learn them, you'll be a lot more efficient. Cool. All right, let's build a calculator. So I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna start off with an H1. We're just gonna say calculator to kind of just have a header so it's not just a plain calculator. And let's refresh the page and see what that looks like. Calculator. So because it's an H1, it's green. I think that's fine. We can have a green calculator. Cool. Okay, so and let me know if I need to slow down. Like definitely don't be bashful. Like, please let me know. I am more than happy to like slow down and let you get caught up. And cool. So we have calculator. Now, what I would like to see is some text fields. A text field, maybe like a drop down, like a select drop down that has our like plus, minus, divide, etc. Like what we want to do, what kind of calculation we want to do. So let's do that. So we're gonna say input. Actually, let's do input type equals text. And inputs are self-closed. Now, we talked about a closing whenever it's a wrapping kind of element. Self-close has a slash right before the closing right here. So that just means there's not an opening and closing tag, it's a self-close tag. So it has the type of element, the attribute, and then the closing at the very end. Now, if I refresh this, we have a text box that we can type into. So we're going to have that text input here. And we're going to give it a unique identifier. This unique identifier, we're going to say ID equals num1. We'll come back to this here in a second, but with IDs, the only one HTML element on our page should have this specific ID. So it's a unique identifier. And we're going to come back to that a little bit later because that's going to help us grab this input really easy. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a select dropdown. So this is an opening and closing. So what we're going to do is we're going to open it here. Hold on, let me go back. And if put your cursor right there in the middle of them and just press enter, that'll drop it down and put a line in between. This select dropdown, we're going to give it an ID of operator. Now, inside of selects, they take in options elements. So we're going to say option, and we're going to say value equals plus, and you can see like it's double quotes around these. And then we're just going to say plus like that in between the option tags. And what you'll see here, if you refresh, we now have like a plus right here that we can see, that we can drop down. We're going to do the same thing for minus, for divide, and multiply. So option value equals minus, we'll add a minus sign. Option value equals multiply. And then we'll do option value divide. Now you can use the symbols here. You can also do add, subtract, divide, or sorry, multiply, and divide. And if you put the text in like that and you refresh, then you can actually see the text right here. And then you can kind of select which one you want to do. And maybe we'll keep it like that. I kind of like that better. Cool. And then uh I will let you catch up here in just a second. So just bear with me. We're also going to have another input, type equals text. And this is going to be ID of num2. Kind of like you can basically just copy and paste this one here and just change the ID to num2 if you'd like. And if you refresh the page, that's going to give you another place to type. So we could say one, add one. And then we'll add another, but this time we're gonna add like a button. So we're gonna say button, we'll give it an ID of calculate. And we'll put calculate as the text. And this will create our button for us. So if we refresh that, we have calculate. So we're writing HTML, we're structuring our document. So let's add our we also need a place to put our result. So in this case, I'm gonna add let's add a H3 here. We're gonna not put anything inside it. And we're gonna give it an ID of result. Cool. And we can add like a number just to see what it looked like if it had a number. So it's gonna look like that. All right, so does anyone need to catch up? Like put a plus in chat if you need to catch up. Okay, and let me know once you're caught up, and then we'll move into adding the JavaScript to it. Does anybody else need to catch up as well? Yes. Jada, are you on Mac or Windows? Windows. Okay. So there's a couple of ways that you can do it. If you're not on Ubuntu or WSL, you could probably right click and it should say open in Explorer. Do you see that? If you right click the file, do you see like open in Explorer or anything like that? Gotcha. You might have to let's see here. You could probably go to open and find it there. Yeah, open in browser. Try that. I knew it had like some sort of option. I'm not as familiar with just with Windows as I am Mac. All right, perfect. Cool. All right, is everybody good to continue? And if you are on Windows, then you can, or Mac, then you can just say open index.html there. Cool. All right, so what we're going to do now is we are going to, first of all, go to our browser and kind of think about how to think about this, okay? Thinking about how to think about things is actually important in software engineering because you want to like recognize patterns. So if I type in 12 and we drop this down to subtract and we did 5, if I clicked on calculate, I would expect to see 7 here, right? So that's my go. Now, when thinking about interacting with the HTML, there's one thing that's going to trigger the interaction, and that's me clicking this calculate button. I don't see any kind of result until we click on calculate. Is this the only way to build a calculator, or is there any other different formats we can build calculators? With coding, there are billions of ways to do anything. So I am sure there are many different other formats, for sure. It's basically up to your own imagination. Cool. All right, so let's so the calculate button is what's going to trigger the event. It's me clicking this calculate button that's going to take these 3 things and know what to do with it. So let's talk about the 3 things that we need. So first of all, we need num1, num2, and we need our value of whatever the select is going to be. So we're going to first grab all of the things that we need. So we need actually 4 things. We need this, 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 and our calculate button. So let's start off with calculate. So we're going to say const calculate button equals document. We're going to grab our document. Now this time, instead of query selector, what we're going to do, now we can use query selector. Actually, let's go ahead and use query selector, and then I'll show you a different way if we have time. But in this case, we're using an ID. So with classes, we use dots, but IDs, we use pound signs. And this was num1. So pound sign num1. That means we want the element or the HTML tag that has the ID of num1. So if we look at the HTML, that would be this one right here, has the ID of num1. Oh, sorry, but we want the button. I am getting too far ahead of myself. So we actually want ID of calculate. So let's fix that real quick. Calculate. Okay, perfect. So that'll give us the button. We want the button first because we're gonna have to add our interaction with it. So we're gonna say calculate. And just like we did before, like right here, we grab the HTML element. Now we're gonna add an event to it. So we're gonna say calculate button, that add event listener. What kind of event do we want to add? We want a click. And what's our function? Let's go define it. Let's say function. And we're just going to call this do, or we'll call it calculate. And we'll add calculate here. And a good piece of advice, write a little code and test. So we'll say console.log hi. And now our expectation, You always want to kind of form a hypothesis of what it's going to do. So our expectation is when we click the button right now, it's just going to console.log hi. So we're going to open up, you can click on inspect, go to console, have your console open and click. Oh, refresh the page, make sure you refresh so it loads in the JavaScript. Click and we get our hi. Cool, so that tells us that it's working. Anytime you change your JavaScript, you do have to refresh your page because it's not going to reload the JavaScript until you do. Cool. Okay, so now we need to grab the information. So we're going to create our variables inside the function here. So we want num1. So we're going to say const num1 equals document query selector, same way as before. Pound sign num1. We're going to get num2, document query selector, pound sign num2, same process. And we're going to get our operator, document query selector, operator. Cannot read properties of null reading add event listener at index.js 35. So that means it's probably happening off of your variable here. A couple of things that you want to check for. Does your variable here, is there any kind of typos? Typos is actually a very common thing. So make sure that there's no typos when you type it. And also with the ID here, make sure the ID here matches and is spelled correctly, and the spelling matches the ID of the button here. So just double check that, because what it's saying is it was unable to find anything here. So when you tried to add an event listener to it, it didn't have anything to attach it to. The key initial scale is not recognized and ignored. Interesting. Initial scale. Is that something that you called your ID, or? Not sure of the error from HTML. Let's see here. Okay, recheck your HTML and make sure that it's good. The key initial scale is not recognized and ignored. Is it a warning or is it an error? Oh, right here? It should. The head should be here, but everything should be written in the body. But yeah, it should have head content. Okay, then you could probably ignore it as long as it's working correctly. Yeah. All right. We do have to continue because we're coming up on time. So we're just going to kind of get through this, and you'll have it recorded so you can kind of go back through the lecture after this. So we're just going to kind of continue, okay? And then like you can watch the recording later and like fix your code if you need to. So in this case, we want the values of these. So we're going to say dot value to each one of these. That will give us the value of each one of these. So in other words, we don't want like the input. We want whatever we typed into the input. The same here. We don't want the select. We want whatever we selected. Same thing here. So in this case, we're going to get the values. So getting the dot values to these will give us the whatever we typed or selected. So we can console.log these. So we can say num1, and then we'll say num2 and operator. So let's just refresh. We'll say 1, subtract 1, calculate, cannot read properties of no, reading value. Oh, operator, sorry. I forgot to make that an ID. Let's refresh 1, subtract 1, and we can see we get 1, 1, and the subtract right there. So just make sure that has a pound sign in front of it. And now we just got to do math. Now, one thing to take note is we cannot do math with the values directly. We do have to convert them. And to convert them, we're going to say, let's make this let variables for num1 and num2. Const, you cannot change the value of, lets you can. So we're going to say num1 equals, and to change it from a string to a number, we're going to say parse int num1. We're going to do the same thing with num2, parse int num2. So it's going to change it from like a string, which you can't do math with. Integers you can, so this will convert it over. And now we can do math with these. So in this case, we need to do a couple of checks to know how we want to do the math. So going back to our fork in the road, we're going to say if the operator matches plus, for example. That means we're adding. Then what we're going to do, let's just console.log it first, and then we'll put it on the page real quick. So we'll say num1 plus num2, and then we'll just check it. So I'm going to refresh the page. We'll say 1. We're going to keep it on add, so that should make the operator a plus. 1, calculate, and we end up with 2. So I calculated it. Now we need to take the 2 and add it where the number is, right here. So if we look here, we have this H3 with the ID of results. So we need this H3, and we need to change what its text is. We're just going to make that 0 by default. So let's grab the JavaScript file. So we're going to say const result equals document query selector result. So that should give us our result right here, our H3. Oops, wrong button. Give me just a second here. I did a thing. Give me just a second. Okay, there we go. No, that's wrong. I just accidentally made. Let's see, can everybody still see my screen? Okay. Can everybody still see it? Okay. So so we need to add it here. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Okay, so we're going to take our result and we want to add to its inner text. So the inner text is basically what's in between the H3. So it's the text inside it. And we want to update it to whatever num1 plus num2 is. So now when we do that, we type in 1, we add, so it's on add. 1, calculate, we get 2. If we change it to 2 and add to 1, we get 3. So now we have the first one done, and the rest of them is kind of a rinse and repeat. So we're going to say else if operator is equal to subtract, then it's going to be kind of the same thing. We're going to say result.inner text. equals num1 minus num2. So let's check it. We'll refresh. So we'll say 2 subtract 1, calculate, and it subtracts it to 1. We'll do our multiplication. So operator equals a multiply to result dot enter text equals num1 times num2. So kind of a rinse and repeat. Let's test this one out. So I'm going to refresh. So let's do 4 divide, or sorry, that was multiply. So we're multiplying. Multiply 2 to give us 8. So calculate, and there it is. And then lastly, let's do our divide. So we're gonna say else if. Now we don't have to have an else. We could do else here at the, because it's only gonna be one of the 4 things, but we'll go ahead and do an else if here. So we'll say if it's divide, result dot enter text equals num1 divided by num2. Cool. We'll refresh. We'll say 4 divided by 2, calculate, and we have 2. Okay, perfect. Sorry it went over. I tried to, I did have to rush the last bit so that you had it all, at least for the recording. I wanted to make sure that everybody had all the code. Patricia, do you have, is it okay? Do you have like a little bit of time for some Q&A or?
Go ahead, no worries. Let's have like 10 minutes for Q&A in case anyone didn't have their questions answered. So if you guys have any questions, this is your opportunity. Maybe something that, as I mentioned, this will be recorded, so you will receive this in a couple of days. But in case there was some questions following along, this is a great opportunity to have them answered live by one of our instructors. Don't be shy. In the meantime, I am going to drop our website. This is a place where you can find any of our upcoming events. If you enjoyed this one-on-one workshop, we will be having these on a monthly basis. So you can feel free to check them out. We have them in all of our disciplines: product design, cybersecurity, software engineering, and data science. So that is a great opportunity to just test your skills, learn something new, and I know our instructors are really excited to share more of these skills with you all. Yeah, and last call. I know this was a lot of fun, and honestly, you like answered most of the questions. Oh, we have some.
Okay, let's see. Are
Uh,
there going to be other upcoming courses like this for beginners?
Yes, so next week we have our product design 101 workshop. That one will be all about Figma fundamentals. And then the following week on the 25th, we're having our data science 101 workshop. So you can keep an eye on those. Definitely, if you just want to stay in the loop, I recommend you just checking out that flyerandschool.com website. If you're following us from Meetup, we are posting all of our events there. So that's another place to stay in the loop. And if not, also check us out on LinkedIn. That's a great place to like stay in the loop. If you want to connect with any of us, that's a great place to find us as well.
All right, did have a problem with the dot value appearing. Did you create value as a variable? I did not create value as a variable. Value was attached to when we grabbed num1 and num2 and operator. Those 3 things, you can add dot value to the end of those. So as long as you can as long as you're correctly grabbing them, dot value shouldn't be an issue. Did have a, so does that help answer your question, or were you talking about maybe like the result appearing? Oh, just couldn't see it as an option. Oh, interesting. Do you know which one specifically, or is it on, just couldn't see it as an option. Interesting. Which line of code, can you copy and paste the code in the chat for me? Ar- Area value max. Oh, interesting. Was he trying to use autocomplete? Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, and at the end of num1, it'd be like num1, and then the dot value would be at the end of that, and then you'd have like let num2 document query selector num2 dot value, and then also for operator too, you want dot value at the end of that as well. So cool. Do we have a Java course for the back end? I don't, in software engineering, no, we have Python that we use for backend. We end up using Flask as the backend library. I don't know about any other uh disciplines though. We don't teach Java, do we? I don't
think so.
think so either.
Yeah. The cybersecurity one will be, I believe it's the 16th of October. You can see, again, check out flatironschool.com/events or on Meetup if you follow us there, and we will be posting it there. Just make sure to RSVP, and it should follow the same process. All right. One last question, but if not, I just dropped as well in the chat this feedback form. If you like this event, just let us know. Let us know any feedback, anything that you enjoyed, something you guys will feel like that we can improve on. Any feedback is helpful and helps us reiterate on these events and just make them better for you guys. Yeah, but if not, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that you guys built a great calculator. And if not, I hope that you guys, at least this inspire you guys to continue working on your skills and learning new things. I think that's the whole point of this. So I hope you guys have a great evening, afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us.